this up. Okay, good evening, everybody. A guten chodesh, a very happy chodesh, a happy month. We've now officially begun Adar, right? Aleph Dar. The Chernobylist says, Nachem Nachem in the Sefer Barinayim. Adar stands for Alufa Shel Olam. Dar, as this month is it's a very auspicious month for creating Dir B'Tachtainim, for drawing God down into the world. Basi Lagani Achaisi Kala. Month of Adar, Aleph Dar. And we have our 60 days of Simcha started yesterday, continuing tonight. Yeah. Tonight is also my grandmother's yahrzeit, so we'd like to learn Le'ilui Nishmasa. She was an Egyptian Jew, born in Alexandria. My mother was born in Cairo, not grew up, but was born there at least. And she came from a lineage of Iraqi Jews dating back for who knows how long. Most people don't have, any historical literature about their families, and we didn't until about 5 years ago, when a distant relative basically discovered like a whole notebook written in Arabic. It was written in the 1850s by one of my great ancestors, who lived in Batsra, and this grandmother, so yahrzeit is tonight, this is her father's 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 father. And they lived in Batsra in the times of the Ben Ish Chai, and it's very interesting reading, it was translated, reading the whole journal of how life was like back then, and in detailed measure. They immigrated to Alexandria, to Egypt at that time. In any event, okay, so Le'ilui Nishmasa. We are tonight going to continue in Siman Bais. Siman Bais, again, these first simanim they're packed with information, packed of such juicy and important halachas for our daily lives. So we're going to take a little more time on these chapters than necessarily other chapters. And last week we did the first two seifim, Seif Aleph, Seif Beis, and Siman Beis in chapter 2 in Orach Chaim. We discussed all the laws relating to modesty, covering of the body, etc. And where it applies to, in different body parts it applies to, and if it's a chumrah or if it's a letter of the law. That was all last week. We concluded last week's class with the introduction of this week's class, which is the next three halachas in the Shulchan Aruch, which deal with getting dressed. So we first deal with modesty of not exposing the body, because that's an introduction of how to get dressed, or more, where to get dressed, so you don't expose your body. And then the Shulchan Aruch continues. Now we'll discuss how to get dressed. So that's where we're up to tonight, and we will go through a number of different things, some of them mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch that we read last week, some of them not mentioned but recorded in the Alte Rebbe, Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah, or other later sources, and it'll cover the following subjects. How to get dressed. Number one, not to be dressed sloppy or with garments inside out, not to wear dirty clothing. Does the inside out apply to all garments of the body? What about a yarmulke? Can you wear yarmulke inside out? Your tzitzis. Do you have to know which side your tzitzis are on every single time? Can it be worn backwards, forwards? Can it be inside out? What about socks? Most people, you have socks that, well, some socks, if you wear them inside out, it's not comfortable. But if you have a sock that can be worn either way and you don't know which way it is, does it make a difference? That's going to be our first subject. Our second subject, we will discuss the right side overcoming the left side and preceding the right in many different things. We're going to discuss shoes, dress code, such as Gaisha clothing, color, which is something that really is discussed in Yoreh De'ah. We're going to get to that, and Mirtzim will get to the yarmulke. Hopefully that's what we can cover tonight. If we can cover any more, then we will. So let's begin. The Mechaber started off in the first sif of this subject, sif Gimel, that a person has to be careful when he puts on his clothing, that he shouldn't have it turned inside out. What's the reason, and what does this mean? What's that? Siman Bais of Gimel. Chapter 2, Halach 3, Siman Bais of Gimel. So chapter 2, halacha 3. Not to be dressed sloppy basically is the topic line that the Mechaber here is saying, don't be dressed with something inside out. So the first reason, the Mechaber doesn't say it, but the first reason that we can evidently explore or can evidently admit from this ruling is that a Jew has to look proper. He has to look in a decent way in public, that people will not frown down upon him. People will not look at him degradingly as a person that's representing God, religion, Judaism, Lubavitch, or whatever it is that he's representing. So he has to be dressed in a presentable manner. So in this it says that a person should be careful not to wear something inside out. This is in fact the reason the Alte Rebbe records in his Shulchan Aruch, in the Kama and the Basra in chapter 2, halacha 2 and 3, in which the Alte Rebbe states that a person should do this in order so he doesn't look degrading in other people's eyes. And he says a person who doesn't follow this, he causes himself to fall under the verse of scripture in Mishlei, Proverbs, in which it says, Mis'anei Hashem, all my haters. It refers to certain people as haters. Who are my haters? People who cause people to hate me. In other words, if someone is a observant Jew, and he does everything between him and God, everything's great, and he doesn't really transgress anything, but he does something that to the public is viewed as a degrading matter and degrades what he stands for, he's incorporated in the verse, the scriptural verse, of Mesanei Hashem, those who cause hatred to God. Not a very good description.
So the people who wear the towel in the street on the shoulder, I remember in Crown Heights, that people would go into the street with a towel, and I heard Jews from France, just tourists saying, look at that.
So if it were the case that someone from Crown Heights is visiting in Paris and they wore their towel on the shoulder, and that is very unacceptable in Paris, I agree with you, they should have a talk down and be explained nicely to follow the dress code. But when you're New York, are you kidding? If you're even if you're only wearing the towel, it's acceptable.
What's that? Really? But in Paris,
I understand, but hakol l'fi minhag hamakim. Everything's according to minhag hamakim.
When I was in Berkeley Yeshiva, one of the teachers in Yeshiva said, saw me in the street, says, don't go like that.
So it's relative.
It depends on the. I was just making a joke, but it depends on the area. Okay, obviously, just because it's acceptable in New York, because everything's acceptable in New York, the most liberal city on earth. Okay, doesn't mean that is something that people look upon as dignified. So obviously, a religious Jew has to look dignified because he's representing something. He doesn't be part of Mesanei Hashem. At the same time, what's defined as dignified? So we can't start researching every country's form of dress and have to abide by the highest standard.
There is a derech eretz, a general derech eretz.
So that's something,
Towel is not
right.
a cloth, something that you put on.
I hear what you're saying.
It doesn't.
Okay. So we hear his point. All Crown Heightsers. So 1 second. One second. Can I walk from my apartment to the mikveh with a towel?
I don't know. Depends on the distance.
It's by the valley. Only the cows see me. I don't think they get offended.
No, I'm just telling you a fact.
Right. I understand. I
wouldn't go outside in the street.
Okay, so Hachacham Yaseh B'das, this is given over to each individual to understand that this is something that he can't just say, well, there's no sin. It doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch, I can do whatever I want. I can dress whatever way I want. No, a person has to dress in a way, and not just about dress. Let's extend this past dress. The halacha here is talking about dress, but it's talking about anything that a person does that can cause. So, as they say in the world, you should better than be right, be smart. Because if you're going to be unsmart about being right, in the end, you're wrong. Because you're going to pay off in the long run. So in other words, not always is it smart to be right. So in a case where, it's better to be politically correct and do something that will not lead other people in a way to think badly about you or what you represent, then obviously that should be the action taken. So this is the whole concept of Kiddush Hashem versus Chilul Hashem. The idea of Chilul Hashem from a halachic definition is not this. It's not that you did something that people belittle Hashem's name or your religion that you represent. It's Chilul Hashem is when a person doesn't give up his life al Kiddush Hashem, that's called Chilul Hashem. Or when a person does a sin in front of 10 people, he breaks Shabbos in front of 10 people, that's called a Chilul Hashem, according to halacha. But if a person is walking in Manhattan with a towel down Fifth Avenue with a towel down his on his shoulder, it's not that halach of Shchil Hashem, but it may be something that people frown upon, say, these people dress sloppy or these people look sloppy. And it goes with anything and everything. How a person acts whenever he's in public, they have to take into account. They don't want to be included in the verse of Masaneh Hashem.
That every country, every place has its own code of
Correct.
dressing. And,
So when you go to a country, always, my dad was a big traveler, he always told us whenever you travel a country, first thing before you arrive is you get a book, read about it before you book your ticket, and learn how they dress, learn their morals, right? That's what it says in the Gemara, when you enter into a place, you have to go according to their customs and dress the dress, walk the walk, and talk the talk. Don't offend anyone. Okay. Getting to the exact point that we're referring to of wearing something inside out. So that's the first reason. Another reason that's brought down for why a person should not wear something inside out is due to Kabbalah. The clothing we wear actually have effect on our character. They say you are what you eat, you are what you wear. It has truth to it. What we wear, clothing, are rooted in our makif. They are rooted in an encompassing divine light. Everything has a divinity within it that creates it. What is responsible for the creation of the clothing? So it's called an makif, an encompassing divine light. That encompassing divine light can be a protector or can be a damager. When the laws of dress aren't followed properly according to code, then from a protector it can become a damager. Such as, for example, when a person dresses modestly, it protects them from society. When a person doesn't dress them modestly, and I don't want to get into political problems with what I'm about to say, but it is a fact on paper, they begin asking for trouble. It doesn't protect them anymore. They lose the protection. In fact, the clothing become the cause of the lack of protection. And the same idea here, some Poskim record. Wearing a shirt or a garment inside out, it loses the protection of the divine makif, and it can actually lead to shichcha, to forgetfulness. What's the nafkamina? The practical ramification is, what if it's an undergarment, meaning any garment that's not visible to the outside? If I'm wearing a sweater over my shirt, this is now an undergarment. No one knows if my shirt is inside out. No one knows if my tzitzis is inside out. No one knows if my socks are inside out. So, according to the first reason, it's all about PR, public relations. No one knows. No one's, unless you're going through the scans in the airports, then nobody knows what you're wearing or how you're wearing it. But if you say that it's a spiritual, Kabbalistic reason, then it would apply even to the first layer of clothing, the undergarments, that it should not be worn inside out. Practically, a person should be careful like the second approach based on Kabbalah, and there is also implication from the Alte Rebbe to this extent. So writes the Eshel Avram Buchach, so writes the Seder Hayom and other Poskim, that it's not just a matter of public relations, it's also a personal matter, a spiritual matter that can affect a person. However, when it comes to socks, tzitzis, a belt, a yarmulke, any of these things that may not have one way of being worn over the other, then you don't have to be particular to mark a specific side. You can switch bats, it's not a problem, it doesn't apply to these things. So writes the Eshel Avram Buchach. Again, he was a Hasidic Paisik in the early 1800s. He was a student of Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev. And he writes, he has a number of halachic novelties, and this is one of the things he writes here, is that by such clothing that doesn't have any set way of being worn is not a problem. In fact, we find in Chassidish Sfarim recorded that people who suffer from migraines and headaches, it's a segula to turn over the yarmulke. Like this. Wear an upside-down yarmulke. It's a segula to get rid of the headaches. So definitely that is not our issue. B'diavad, a person went ahead and wore it inside out. Should he overturn it? He already did it. So the Alte Rebbe writes as follows. If the person is a Talmud Chacham, then he needs to remove the clothing and put it right side up, right side in. However, and if he doesn't, then he he will cause Masane Hashem. People will look down upon what he's representing. But the implication there is, as right other Poskim, which is the Taz and the Prisha, that if he's not a Talmud Chacham, then even though initially everybody should be careful, b'diavad, if he wasn't, it's okay, he can walk around like this Shlamazel. It's not a problem. But based on the other approach that we already brought, everybody should be careful in this, nothing to do with whether the person's a Torah scholar or not. And so writes the Chidam Birkei Yosef and other Poskim, that if this happens, a person should remove and put on the right way, including an undergarment, as we already said. Including an undergarment, a person should be careful to redo. But once we're on the subject of it being dressed properly and not sloppy, so I do remember hearing, and I don't have this documented, it could be it's not true, but at least the rumors out there, that's a start, that the Rebbe was not very happy with Bachrim walking with their shirts out, especially when they would go on with Tzayim to, representing themselves in Lubavitch to influence other Jews in the observance of Judaism with a shirt out, because it's a sloppy mode of dress. On the other hand, there's also a might. Anyone heard of this?
No.
So the idea of having your shirt out is viewed as sloppy. That's like, saying, what happened? You running to work? Like, what happened? Did you?
I once heard a very influential Rabbi in Crown Heights justify that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
He said because the Indian of being Masate and tzitzis, by having the shirt out and the tzitzis out and being wrapped, it's easier for you to be completely wrapped in your tzitzis than for your tzitzis to bunch up and not be completely wrapped and you roll around.
So I don't know who you're referring to, but no, it's okay. With all due respect, I would actually suggest the exact opposite. When your tzitzis are out and your shirt is out, it's very easy for your tzitzis to become crumbled up. And I see this with myself, so nobody can tell me otherwise, okay? It becomes folded, even with a bindle. However, when it's tucked in like this, ain't going anywhere. It's staying exactly where it is. So when you dress yourself like this and you have your amma, it stays there. So I don't understand the logic of that statement. But in any event.
When did the Rebbe say that? Where did you see?
I said I didn't. I said undocumented rumor.
Undocumented.
Rumor. Just a rumor.
All the Bachurim in Crown Heights is the other way. My son told me,
No, Crown Heights,
we have to take it out because of the Indian of the tzitzis.
What's the logic of the tzitzis?
I remember Rabbi Greenglass.
What's the logic of the tzitzis?
He would tell the Bachurim, no, Rabbi Greenglass.
He would tell them what? What would Rabbi Greenglass tell them?
Put them in.
Oh,
them in.
Not to have them out.
No?
So not what he.
My son told me.
One second. It wasn't clear to me what we were trying to say. You were saying that everyone wears it out, or everyone wears it in.
Crown Heights.
Right.
The Bachurim everywhere.
Right.
Because for the reason he mentioned. Okay.
And what's the reason? Did you understand the reason?
Okay, it's a point.
That was the
When
reason
I
they said you say
saw
it's not a reason.
in Montreal Rabbi Greenglass, you heard about him?
Of course, sure.
Okay, he would, when a Bachur would come with his shirt out,
Right.
maybe the Bachur had no jacket, maybe there was a reason.
Right.
But would tell him to put him in.
Right. Okay. Again, these are just rumors. Bottom line is that when we come to
That's
the laws of
I just saw
tzitzis,
it.
right? I know. I understand. You saw it with Rabbi Greenglass,
So
but
he got it from the Rebbe, probably.
that I don't know. I can't take it that far. But there definitely is a rumor that the Rebbe did say was not happy with such a thing. Whether that is correct or not, I don't know. But regarding the tzitzis aspect, once again, when we get to the chassidus, we'll discuss it in greater length and the halachas behind it. I've said many times to people that, if you don't have a bindle, then that's what you should do. Make sure to always tuck in your tzitzis and tuck in your shirt, as that protects the tzitzis from then folding over. I don't understand how we can have an argument in a fact. Enlighten me if anyone can. And I'd be happy to hear. Okay. Our next discussion is the right side. Now, this is not right versus wrong. This is right versus left, which some may say is right versus wrong, but that's something else. Okay, the right side. I mean, right, those on the right always say those on the left are wrong, right? The lefties.
Lefties are on the right side of the brain.
Oh. Okay. So we read already inside the Mechaber, he dealt with the idea of right versus left when he was telling us in Sif Dalid and Sif Hey regarding the shoes, and he said that put on first your right shoe, then tie, and don't tie it, then put on your left shoe and tie it, and then tie your right shoe. The Ramah says if you don't have laces, they're just slip-ons, then put on the right shoe. What? No, you put on your right shoe first, don't tie it, put on your left shoe, tie it. That's what the Mechaber wrote. So that introduces us to the whole concept of right versus left. Let's begin. This is, again, not in politics. In politics, right is always right. Not to offend anyone on the left. Okay. So let's begin. The Alte Rebbe here in the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 2, he goes through a number of details of why the right is important and the idea of preceding the right. So we're going to see as we go through this discussion that it's not limited only to clothing, but in fact with all mitzvahs we always try to give honor and respect to the right side. The halachic reason behind it is because of the scriptural root and source. In scripture we find in various discussions of mitzvahs that the Torah gave precedence to the right, that the Torah, when it mentions a certain fulfillment of a mitzvah or action, the right side was pointed out, was highlighted, and it didn't just say, use your hand, use your right hand, use your right foot. Such as, for example, the Alte Rebbe records, this is in the Madura Basra, chapter 2, halacha 4 in the Alte Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, such as he writes, that regarding the temple service, it's right, we know that the Kohen must serve with his right hand. If he serves with his left hand, avodah is pasul, ad kedei kach. The difference between whether this avodah will be kosher or invalid is which hand did he use. So if he was busy on his phone in the middle of taking someone's blood, and he took the blood with the left hand while watching something and threw it, the avodah is invalid and run for your life. If he's a lefty, he can't serve. I believe, if I remember correctly, someone can look this up. If I remember correctly, it's considered, you can't serve if you're a lefty. A Kohen who's a lefty can't serve in the temple. I'll look it up, but I believe that's what the Rambam is.
Kohen using his right thumb on his right.
Oh yeah, we're not done. We're coming up. We're continuing. Okay, that's the first thing that the Alte Rebbe mentions in the Basra is regarding the temple service. The next he mentions regarding the inauguration of the Levium. It says there explicitly that Moshe had to put the oil and the blood on the right thumb, the big thumb, and the big toe of the right foot, the right hand. So once again, we see the right is highlighted. We also see regarding the mitzvah of chalitza that the Torah says that the shoe has to be worn on the right foot of the yavam and then removed. Chalitza noah. The shoe is moved from the right foot, and it has to be specifically the right foot. And if they do the wrong foot, it could be invalid even b'di'evan. That's why the dayanim, when they do a chalitza procedure, they always test, or if they know what they're doing, they always make sure to test the demonstrator, which is the yavam, the brother-in-law, the brother of the deceased, to find out, is he a righty or a lefty? However, in that case, they're not looking for which hand does he use to write like you are. They don't tell him, grab a pen and write us that you will never do this again to your sister-in-law. And they then look and see which hand did he use. He used his left hand, he's a lefty. He used his right hand as a righty. That's not how they tell. The way they tell is they find out how do they walk. So they tell him, walk to me for a second, can you come forward? And they stare at his feet. If he begins walking with his right foot, he's a righty, and it must go on the right. If he walks with his left foot, he's a lefty, it goes on the left. But we have to determine first that what is his right foot. So we go versus the right. This is the mitzvah of chalitza.
So wait a second. If he's a lefty, then the shoe goes on the left foot?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get, I believe, if I remember correctly, I have to look it up in Even Ezer. I believe that that's what's written over there. But one thing that's for certain is that in the Torah and in the Shulchan Aruch, we see that the right foot for the right-footed is where it has to go. So based on this, that the Torah honors the right, we too have to honor the right. That is the reason the Alte Rebbe and the Poskim present as why the right has to be given precedence, being that Scripture gave it precedence. However, in Kabbalah, we find a different reason, and very interestingly, the Alte Rebbe doesn't bring this reason, and the Mishnah Berurah does. If you look in Siman Daled, Sif, Katan, Chav, Bais, in the name of the Malbim, the Artzis Chaim, he brings down this reason, that based on Kabbalah, the right side is chesed and the left side is gvura, and the way we do things affects the channeling of the chesed and gvura. So therefore, we would much rather have chesed and gvura, right? We'd much rather be happy than melancholy, have an upper than a downer, so we always precede the right, which is chesed. So these are the two reasons for, in general, why we precede the right, and now let's get moving with getting dressed and everything else. So when getting dressed, the Mechaber simply discussed shoes, but the rest of the Poskim discussed the rest of the wardrobe. The Alte Rebbe writes this in Madura Kamen 2.3, Madura Basa 2.4, that when a person places on a shirt and other clothing, such as a jacket or an undershirt, always begin dressing the right arm first. It's a matter you get used to, and then you just do it out of habit, but it's good to think about it, that you're fulfilling this mitzvah when you're actually doing this, that you're overcoming the right, you're preceding the right. And once again, this emphasizes to us the idea of respect in society, that there's hierarchy and not everything's equal and exactly the same. There's idea of respect. There's idea of respect to parents, respect to God, respect to authority. It really hits home the whole idea of where it's not a free-for-all. So even in your own body, you respect, the right side. And then, as the Alte writes, first the right arm, then the left arm, so too regarding pants and socks. He writes this in Dorbasra, even socks. First the right sock, then the left sock. First the right pants, then the left pants. And he likewise records in chapter Orach 3 in the Madura Kama, and this is a ruling that's written in the Magen Avram based on the Arizal and Shara Kavanis. Interestingly, in the Madura Basa, the second version of the Shulchan Aruch, he omitted this, and we don't know why. Usually we say that the second version of the Alte Shulchan Aruch went more with the Kabbalists, but when you start nitty-gritting down the details of what was written, what was omitted, you see some of the Kabbalistic rulings written in the first version never made it to the second version. We don't know why, but this is one of them. Not everyone knows this, not only should you precede the right side, even do Tanigla, as we already mentioned, because the Torah precedes it, but also the part that you put on the left side should first be on the right side, which means if I have a shirt, I shouldn't only grab the right sleeve of the shirt to put on my right arm. I should grab the whole shirt, have the whole shirt on my right arm, put it in the right, and then hand the left to the right. Hand what's in my right arm to the left and have it put on the left. So in other words, everything's coming from the right. We do this, what we do this in is with Negelwasser in the morning, right? We fill it up with water, lift it with our right arm, and have our right arm give it to the left arm. Why do we do that? What is he, a nebuch? He can't pick up a bucket of water. Let him pick it up straight. What does he need the right arm to do it for him? Same idea. It's the same halacha. You're giving from chesed to gvura. This is based on Kabbalah. It's based on the Arizal, that the right gives to the left. And the Alte Rebbe writes that when a person does this, he should have in mind that everything is incorporated in chesed in the right and is then given to the left.
How do you do that with your shirt, practically speaking?
I think just hold on to both sides with your right arm. Just hold on, pick it up. You're holding on. You're not just holding on to the sleeve. You hold on to the whole thing. You put on the right one, and then you put on the left one.
You put on the right one, then
get dressed however you do. Get dressed however you do every morning. Just have in mind that when the shirt is held in your right hand, that is then giving the rest of it to the left. That's the idea. Maybe that's why the Alte Rebbe omitted in the Basra. He said he tried this a few times, and I'm not writing this. This is too hard. Okay. Getting undressed. So interestingly, 99% of the Poskim, including the Alte Rebbe, make no mention regarding undress. They only mention getting dressed. But the same way the Mechaber mentions regarding undressing the shoes to precede the left, we can understand from there that regarding undressing the clothing, one should precede the left. In other words, it's a greater honor to get the left sides off first. That honors the right, that the right has his clothing stay on longer. Let's not forget, our clothing are our protectors. If our clothing protecting us from the cold, why should the right have his taken off first? You say, always proceed the right. If I take him off first, he's getting exposed to the cold first. That's not something beneficial for him. So first goes the left. We're very sorry, you know. Baruch Hashem, they don't get into fights ever, you know. Baruch Hashem, they don't get into fights ever. But, you know, this is the halacha. This is recorded in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in chapter 3, halacha 4. And other Poskim also record it based on the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, that we first discussed regarding right versus left is not recorded in any of the classical Poskim, but rather in Chassidish Sfarim, and that is the Chassidic minhag of wearing the right side of a clothing over the left side of a clothing. So the custom is as follows, that whenever we wear something that has two sides, we always try to have the right side over the left, unlike my shirt. Don't look at my shirt as an example. This is the opposite. This is the left side over the right side. Okay, so we shouldn't be doing this. We'll get to the shirt soon. It's never comfortable to preach about something you don't do. So we'll take care of that soon. But the idea is that, for example, if you're wearing a coat, you should have the right part of the coat over the left side. A kapata should have the right side over the left side and not the opposite. And the reason for this is, once again, based on the Kabbalah, to have chesed over gvura. This minhag is, again, this is not a halach in Shulchan Aruch. I repeat, it's not written in any of the classical Sfarim. It's written in some limited Chassidish Sfarim. The Ktsaisa Shulchan, the famous Chabad Pesach, records it. It's recorded in Tamei HaMinhagim, and its first source is in the Sefer Menachem Tzion of the Rimnaver. The Rimnaver Rebbe, this is the first source that we know of where this is recorded, and the Rebbe discussed this minhag in a Fabregan as a Chassidish minhag that is kept. It's kept by all Chassidim, all Chassidic groups pretty much keep this, not just Chabad, that we always put the right over the left. And therefore,
as far as I know, this is the way men's shirts are, and the other way is women's
you are
shirts.
absolutely correct.
So then in effect saying, wear a woman's shirt? I don't think he's saying that, but, you know.
So, yeah, there's nothing wrong halachically with wearing a shirt that has the right side over the left side. Meaning woman's shirt. Not to wear a woman's shirt, but to wear. So let me get to the shirt in a second. Let's first discuss everything else in the wardrobe. Basically a jacket. Right, so that's what I do. That's what I do with my davening jacket. I always wrap. What the Rebbe did say is that people, once the Rebbe was discussing what you do with your time on the night of Nittel, when we don't learn Torah, unsew your buttons and put the buttons on the right side. And put the buttons on the left side, so the right will be over the Rebbe said it. Put the right over the left. And it's brought down that Chassidim would go to special tailors, have special tailors that they would bring their coats and jackets to redo the buttons. So even if you didn't go in and do that, as he said, it is a good thing to.
One underneath,
right, but at the same time, we don't want to then transgress the halacha, which is dressing sloppy. If someone's going to say, this guy doesn't even know how to button his jacket.
You put two bottoms, one beneath, you don't see the difference.
Say it again, demonstrate for us.
Put another bottom here.
Oh, to sew a button, yes. To sew a button, okay, great. So we just got a great idea. Instead of giving it to the tailor, become the tailor, right? Tailor one single button there.
But then you have the buttonhole on the, you have to put a buttonhole.
Just one underneath.
Put the button on the side.
Here, one underneath. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, great idea, unbelievable. Okay. Right, it doesn't look sloppy and it's where it goes well. Okay, so that's so now what about the shirt? So I was always disturbed about the shirt business, and it happened to be, if you look at the Rebbe shirts, the way my shirt is just like the way the Rebbe shirt was. My shirt is just like the way the Rebbe shirt was. The left was over the right, and practically all men's shirts. Now, if you go to Williamsburg or Kiryat Yoel, you will see a lot of the Chassidim, they have special shirts made with the right over the left. And they wear right over left, not left over right. It's a special manufacturer.
Shirt is not an important clothes, it's not like a jacket.
So when I asked Rabbi Groner, he said that he doesn't know the reason of why there is a difference between a shirt and a jacket, but practically he knows that by Chassid Chabad, we were not makbid regarding the shirt. The Rebbe was not makbid. But other Chassidic groups are careful even regarding the shirt to this extent. The Rebbe also, in Menachem Tzion, which is of the Rimnaver, he mentions that this minhag also applies to women. It's not just a male minhag. Women also need chesed over gvura, not just men.
But you have it automatically.
They have it.
to have it
Right, but they
automatically.
have a jacket. I don't know. Not maybe some of their jackets aren't made that way. So everyone has to be careful in that. Okay, there is a story that was featured in Living Torah Parshas Bais 5774. That is where you can find this story. Okay, where they interviewed an individual who said the following Maisa that happened with his father. This individual is now in his, 50s, living in Ramot, and he said the following story happened in 1990 or 1991. He said his father traveled to New York to raise money for some very, very difficult business difficulties he was facing in Eretz Yisrael. His parnasa, he was in tremendous debt, and he was having, he was under tremendous pressure and stress. And he traveled to New York to collect money and to go by the Rebbe and get a bracha from the Rebbe. So the collection didn't go very well, and he was super desperate for at least the bracha. But he's waiting by dollars on a Sunday, and there's a million people there, and you're not even given a chance to open your mouth, otherwise you get on Rabbi Groner's right hand, and if you know what I mean. So he sees this happening, and he became very despondent, and he became very maybe you have some connections, and he became very despondent, and he just being in front of the Rebbe, you become full of anxiety, and you almost forget why you're even here. Why am I even in New York? What am I doing? So his turn came, and he had prepared and reviewed 1,000,000 times his 5 words that he would say, Rebbe, I need a bracha for parnasa. But when he came and stood in front of the Rebbe, he said he blanked out, he forgot everything, and he just said, I need a bracha. That's what he said. I need a bracha. And so the Rebbe gave him $1, bracha v'atzlach, and he left. So he said that that the Rebbe then called his father back as his father left, to the next person to come. The Rebbe called his father back, and the Rebbe told him the following: you should have a tailor switch the buttons of your coat, of your jacket, so it's be right over left, and this will help you with your parnasa. This is what this individual testifies that happened with his father. Not Lubavitch Chassidim. And so we see Ad Kedei Kach, and the Rebbe told us twice to his father. The father was shocked, didn't understand. He forgot to mention about parnasa. He didn't even mention it. The Rebbe told him that switching it, having chesed over gvur, sometimes these little things, it's like a pipe. You have something stuck in the pipe. Sometimes you think it's some huge thing. Just unscrew the pipe a little bit. Let everything be able to flow through, and you're good. Put right over left. The channel of chesed is now open, and become a millionaire. Sound good? Sounds too easy.
What was the bracha?
Okay. Now we're going to discuss all about lefties. I know we've been waiting for this for a while, and I purposely left it for the end. Okay? Lefties. So lefties cause us a lot of halachic headaches. And the reason is because what they should do in cases of halacha, not just this is the little league, this is minor league, these halachas, which are, good things, you're supposed to do them, but they're not make it or break it halachas. But when it comes to certain things where you have to do the right side, what does a lefty do? It's very serious. What do you do? Okay, so let's first talk about in this respect of this halacha, should a lefty precede his right side first, like everyone else, or should he precede his left side first, because that is his stronger side. That's what a lefty is that he is his stronger side is his left arm or his left leg if he's left-legged. So we have a machlekes in this. And again, interestingly, we find that the Bali Hanigla took more of a Kabbalistic approach, while the Bali Hanister took a halachic approach. It's strange, but this is what it is in the Poskim. So we already mentioned 2 reasons of why we precede the right. One was halacha, because the Torah gave precedence to the right. And the second is because of chesed versus gvur, and chesed is on the right side. So a number of poskim say that the main reason is the Kabbalistic reason, that the channel of chesed is on your right side. That doesn't change by a lefty. Your sphere of chesed is here. It doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed. So if that's why we're preceding the right, you always precede the right. It doesn't matter which hand you use personally to write with and do things with. Your right hand would always remain the more superior side and more spiritual side. This is the implied ruling of the Mishnah Brura. This is the implied ruling of the Shari Tshuva and other Poskim. However, from the Alte Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, it's implied not this way, that a lefty should precede his left side. As the reason why the Torah gave power or precedence to the right is because the right is stronger. Honor the more powerful, honor the rich. Chabad Asashir. However, by him, the rich and the more powerful is the left, so then honor the left. You can't dishonor one of your more powerful sides just because of some Kabbalistic reason. That's in essence the approach of the Alte Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek. Where do we see this? They did not write about this in these halachas, but they did write about it in other halachas, such as, for example, in Tilas Yadayim. We already mentioned the idea of holding in your right hand and giving it to your left hand washes your right hand. Also, all based on Kabbalah because of the right. What does the Tzemach Tzedek rule regarding Tilas Yadayim? That a lefty washes his left hand first. Lift with your left, give to your right, and wash your left hand first. So if so, we see that we don't say across the board always give precedence to the right. The Alte Rebbe also writes this in chapter 183, Halacha 7, regarding Kaishel Bracha. He says, according to the other Poskim, no, always the right, doesn't matter what you write with. The Alte Rebbe rules the Kaishel Bracha, if you're a lefty, should be held in your left hand. Now maybe it was just being practical, we don't want it spilling, right? You hold it with your weaker hand, it's harder to balance. But nonetheless, this is how he rules regarding there. Also regarding lulav, we find a machlekes in the Poskim in chapter Taf Reish Nun Aleph in 651, the laws of Daled Minim. How should a lefty hold the lulav and esrog? A righty holds the lulav in his right hand and the esrog in his left hand. However, a lefty does the opposite rules of the Alte Rebbe. He's to hold the lulav in his left hand and the esrog in his right hand. So once again, we see the Alte Rebbe is going on the same train of thought, the same train of ruling, that for a lefty, for all halachic purposes, his left side is like the righty's right side. So this is a machlekes. We don't have a clear arbitration. Those who follow the Alte Rebbe Shulchan Aruch are leaned to precede the left, but on the other hand, we say based on Kabbalah, precede the right. So we don't really have anything clear-cut in this. So the best solution is don't be a lefty. Don't get into trouble.
Does that fall into the category in general that we Poskim like halacha and not like
That's where it's a little tricky because it could be the Alte Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek. They were ruling like Nigla, but in truth, if you would ask them personally, they would say, do like Kabbalah. In other words, because the Shulchan Aruch it follows guidelines and rules. The Alte Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch doesn't just write whatever he wants. He follows certain guidelines, and if something is not ruled in halacha a certain way, then even though Kabbalah has something else to say about it, he will not rule that way. We see this all the time. Many minhagei Chabad were not ruled in the Shulchan Aruch, even though our tradition is they come from the times of the Alte Rebbe. Because these type of traditions, they don't fall into the guidelines of the writing of the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore it didn't make the threshold of being written in the Shulchan Aruch. Let's put it that way. But it doesn't mean that we wouldn't follow. So I'm just saying there's room for both. What I personally will tell a lefty is, like the Alte Rebbe, to precede the left side. But nonetheless, I think there's room for both approaches, and I guess we can leave it up to the lefty to decide what he wants to do. But as the Poskim point out, he should be consistent. Because if you're not consistent, then someone's always going to get upset. Meaning either the Kabbalist or the halacha is, everyone's going to be unhappy someday. So the best thing is to pick a path and go through with it all the way.
Fill in, right?
Yes.
Once he's supposed to.
The lefty puts on his right hand, yeah. Right.
So that would seem, and that's all.
Why didn't I bring a proof from? Well, that's because it has scriptural source. You can't bring a proof from scriptural, where Scripture explicitly tells you. You can't use that as a general rule necessarily. Right, so you would do it on your left hand because that's where you're not wearing your tefillin. No, I'm saying by Shachris, you're wearing your tefillin here, so you do it on this end. That everyone agrees to. But by Mincha, that's where we have the machlekes.
Does that mean if you have a child who shows a preference for his left hand, should you try to teach him
Never,
to go the other way?
never,
What?
absolutely never.
Because
Because when you do that, if a person's a natural lefty and you try to do it the other way, you have all sorts of problems. The kid will begin to stutter, the kid will have, absolutely, you never ever do that. When I was lucky that I was in a very low a school that of immigrants. Nobody ever tried to change me. Other lefties would have their left hand hit with a ruler to stop it from doing
Wow.
any kind of brutality.
No, they
Right.
believed it should be a lefty. When I was a kid, we wrote with an inkwell and a nib, and a lefty just schmutz. So that was the reason for it.
My response to such questions is that there's nothing in halacha or Judaism that I know of regarding that subject, other than one thing which I'll say in a moment, but it's really a question for a doctor or maybe a child psychologist to have a firm based on fact-based evidence. Not to disregard what you said.
No, mine is just my own experience.
Right. At the same time, we do find, because of the tefillin debate, you see, if you write with your left hand and you do things with your left hand, it's very simple. The halacha is you put tefillin on your right hand. But it's not so simple with lefties. You have some lefties where they only write with their left hand, but they'll actually do everything with their right hand. Or the opposite, they'll write with their right hand, but they do it with their left hand. Those are very confused people. Because in Hilchos...
I play sports as a righty.
So in Hilchos Tefillin, it enters us into a big problem. We're going to learn this Amirat Hashem when we reach Siman Chav Zayin. We'll learn about the whole confusion and debate there. But basically, in such a case where for some things the right and for some things the left, such an individual has an unclarity in halacha of which hand he should be putting tefillin on. So because of that, it is brought down in some Sfarim that a person in that situation would train themselves to choose either left or right, but not to have both. Because basically, you're putting on tefillin in your right, according to some places, you didn't put on tefillin your whole life. You're putting on tefillin in your left, according to some places, you didn't put on tefillin in your whole life. It's a big machlekes. It's machlekes in the Alte Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek.
I know somebody who was told to do both.
Right. No, there's discussion on that. That's not the leaning ruling of Rabbani Anash, but nonetheless, yeah, there is such a thing. To put on both because of that. Okay. What to wear first. So this is our last point on the getting dressed before we get to the shoes. And this is, again, a subject that actually did not make it into the Shulchan Aruch of what a person should wear first in terms of, I understand, precede the right side first, but which garment should you wear first? Now, obviously, you have to put on your pants before your other garment. I'm not referring to that. You have to put on your socks before your shoes. I'm not referring to the obvious. I'm referring to, do you dress the upper side of your body first or the lower side first? So you can say that it's up to your discretion, and halacha doesn't discuss it, which is true. The Shulchan Aruch and the Achronim do not discuss this, which seems to imply it's the Wild West. Do whatever you want, your discretion. However, we do find some Svarim who discuss a tradition, an oral tradition that has been handed from generation to generation of the order of getting dressed. Now, before I go into what they write, let's first discuss the reasons behind the preferences of what to do first. There's a preference to garb the top of your body first, because that contains the tzitzis, which is the mitzvah, dal and kanfas. There's a preference, on the other hand, to garb the bottom part of your body first for modesty reasons. So there's advantage of each one. Bottom line, the Sefer Divrei Yikusiel, he was a European rabbi about 100 and some odd years ago. So he writes in his Sefer that the tradition always was that by Chassidim we do one way, and by Misnagdim they did another way. That's what he writes. The tradition amongst Chassidim was to get dressed in one method, while amongst Misnagdim was to get dressed in another method. Does anyone know which is which? What do the Chassidim do?
They dress the top first.
Undress from the bottom up.
Okay. Yeah, it's over here. So Taras Yikusiya writes that the Chassidim, the tradition amongst the Chassidim is is that we always dress the top first and only then the bottom. By undressing, we undress the bottom first and then the top. In other words, we want to have the mitzvahs on us the most time. This is also recorded in Tshuva, the Minchas Yitzchak, and it's based on, well, both traditions are based on a brisa in Derech Eretz Zuta. Derech Eretz Zuta is basically, it's a tractate in Talmud. It's called one of the small Masechtas. And there are two different brises which imply like both of the different traditions. One implying like the Hasidic tradition of first doing the top, and the second like the second tradition of first doing. So that was the tradition always of the Misnagdim first to, or the illumination, it's called Misnagdim, to do the pants first or to take off the shirt first, and the opposite way by Chassidim. This is something that unfortunately, for some reason, not all Chassidim know about today, and you see that not everyone is careful in this just due to lack of knowledge.
I remember you teaching this, and I thought it was halacha because you were saying
Tradition.
in the mikveh, you can see it. People are doing it wrong, but
It's tradition, yes. It's tradition. It's not written in Shulchan Aruch, so they wouldn't really come across this. The Rebbe did once discuss this, and what the Rebbe, however, said is the Rebbe, when he discussed this, discussed another point of advantage for how the Litvaks do it. And that is that by the Kohen, it says that he would first get dressed with his pants. So that's like how the Eilmashers do it. So it seems from that sikha that the Rebbe seemed to be concluding that while of course the undershirt and the tzitzis should go on first, but then you should put on the pants and only then the shirt. And only then should you put on the shirt afterwards. But that's not 100% from the sikha. That's how some deduce from that talk of the Rebbe. It's not very clear, but nonetheless, the Rebbe did discuss this matter. Bottom line is this is the custom amongst the Chassidim, and there's reason behind it, as we mentioned, and each group should follow their tradition, and there's reasons and advantages behind each one. A person told me that he grew up in a fine Lubavitch home, and he was never taught this, and he once had the luck of being in the mikveh in Kfar Chabad, getting dressed right next to a Mendel Fuderfast. And boy, did he pay for it when he put on his pants first, before his undershirt and tzitzis. Mendel had a field day with him. Mendel told him, "What are you doing? A bacher, a tamim, what are you doing getting dressed? The Chassidim don't dress this way." I'm sure he did it in a nice way. But the point is, we see that this was something. We see that this is a...
Just to clarify, obviously...
This is for lefties also, makes no difference.
No, but obviously you put on your underwear before you're putting on your pants or your shirt.
You could. Yeah, that's what some people do. They want to cover the erva first.
Otherwise, you don't have your underwear on, you're putting on it.
Okay, yeah, there's no Isser mitzad that, but yeah, so some people actually do go ahead and wear that first, correct. The first thing that's brought down is the yarmulke. That's before everything else. Those people who come to the mikveh or wherever they're going and they throw off the first garment they take off as the yarmulke, it's not a very good sign. It's not a very good sign. It's the first thing, the most important thing on your head. Okay, Emir Hashem, next week we will continue and finish off regarding shoes. Dress code, as I mentioned, Goyish clothing color, and we have the yarmulke walking, and that will cap off chapter 2.
Can you talk about the union of taking off or putting on two garments at the same time?
Yes, we are. Emir Hashem, we will discuss that. Okay.